Well, we hope you enjoyed the tour of Airlie Garden. I'm never going to say that right. And 0.5 miles away, literally right across the causeway, is the North Carolina Cooperative Extension New Hanover County Arboretum, which we have just pulled in.
Yep.
And I've spoken here, but I've never had the opportunity to tour the grounds. And since Andrew's here all the way from Philly, I figured we had to hit up 2 gardens. So I hope you'll enjoy this tour. Already behind us, we've got a really interesting large Japanese maple that maybe is just a blood good, but look at the caliper.
Yeah, nice size.
Really impressive. And I do happen to think everything looks better with Spanish moss in it.
Of course.
So, all right, so we're gonna continue the tour here. So this garden is great because it is labeled. This is a hybrid curly willow. This is Radiant Curls, I think. So this is one that you often will find like in the cut flower industry. Of course, you can coppice or cut back hard a willow and it'll just grow right back out. And I love the sycamore behind it. I have a soft spot for platanus. I grew up with giant ones in my childhood yard. Doesn't everything look good with the Carolina blue sky?
Yes.
And I did not know that this garden is part of the ACS Camellia Trail, but that's always exciting. You just made visiting the Arboretum the best thing in the whole world. Hi! So this is a really big bootia. And I just have to take note of the 4-H's. I'm a 4-H girl. That was how I got introduced to horticulture, thanks to my local extension agent. I first learned botanical Latin entering Equinox Retro into the county fair. This is a really important element of life on the coast and doing proper stormwater infiltration and creating bioswales that actually function and don't fail when we get a big water event like a hurricane. So we've entered the native pollinator garden. And obviously January isn't totally the time for the super active flowering stuff, but it's good for me to get in here and see. So I should get Lyonia. That's a nice broadleaf evergreen. And I used to actually grow Lyonia at Camellia Forest. I need to find that. It's a little rambly, but that's sort of the nature of a lot of these native plants. I'm trying to talk myself off the ledge when like itea spread everywhere. Like, that's good.
Caroliniana is a good one.
Prunus caroliniana is a very good one. And that is right here. And of course, wax myrtle and Elysium. So these are all great native broadleaf evergreens that will help provide structure. I currently have a great collection of deciduous shrubs. And when these get planted, it's not even going to look like a garden. And of course, the herbaceous layer, is dormant at this time of year. And so that's where it's important to have trees, shrubs, perennials, and annuals all mixed together so that it gives you actual 12 months of interest. And here's a rose garden. I'm not a big fan of rose gardens, so we'll just leave it at that. Here we've got a big koi pond. I do love those floating islands. I think those are really fun. At the Denver Botanical Garden, they had those a few years ago and they were growing food in them. So it's kind of like aquaculture. We're entering now into the Japanese maple or Japanese garden, and the maples are quite impressive. And of course, you know, traditionally southern horticulture revolved around a lot of Asian species, including, you know, Nandina and Osmanthus and camellias and gardenias and hydrangeas. You know, many of the azaleas, any of the basics of southern horticulture are of Asian descent. And that we're in an era now where we have greater awareness of growing native plants. There's still a large role that, you know, Chinese and Japanese plants play. And it's pretty impressive to see some successfully grown conifers. Down here we're like probably 1.5 miles from the ocean. So, you know, this is a hot environment for conifers, but there are a lot of Asian species that do well, like Cryptomeria and Chamaecyparis, Pinus thunbergii. So we're entering the ceremonial tea house. And I really like the Korean tassel fern. Those look great. Not a lot of cold damage on these. Let's go in. Oh, how beautiful. I'm really impressed so far.
Yeah, this is a great public garden that's not really on a lot of people's radar.
As free of charge. It's open 7 days a week from, this tells me, hang on, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m.
Right, free and open to the public. Great labeling.
Great labeling.
Great use of plants.
And it's right off the main road that takes you straight into downtown Wilmington. And just across the way is Wrightsville Beach, where I always go. I'm feeling quite ashamed that I come here at least several times a year to the beach, and I have never driven 0.5 miles off of my path to come visit this garden.
Well, it can be a new stop for you.
It's definitely going to be a new stop. I highly recommend visiting this garden here, the NC Cooperative Extension, New Hanover County Arboretum. We haven't seen it all yet, so this isn't the end, but just wanted to give you that PSA. It's a nice specimen of Illicium henryi. If you're not familiar with Illicium, it's a great plant, especially for southern gardens. Animals don't like to eat it because it smells like anise. That's why it's called the anise tree. It's got a really strong kind of licoricey smell if you crush the leaves. And it's one of those plants, if you live with a lot of deer and you want some native screening, Illicium floridanum is a really good option, especially in wet areas like where my property is. I happen to love the smell.
And it's the most, according to Steve Mastardi, Illicium floridanum's the most cold hardy of all the Illiciums.
Good to know. So don't let that species name floridanum influence your decision. Is it hardy to zone 6?
Yeah, hardy in Philadelphia. Perfectly hardy. And takes the dry shade.
See, you really should be the one doing the commentary to give everybody a more northern perspective, right. Or at least mid-Atlantic perspective. I think we're coming into a camellia garden. Look at the buds. Okay, so this is obviously a reticulata. Yes, it is. It's Frank Hauser. It's one of the very best. This is such an impressive plant. And you see the buds are really, really big. Versus, so you see that's like 2 of my fingers, versus a japonica here, which this is sea foam. So that's like 1 finger depth. That's one way to distinguish the two. Sea foam is a really fabulous formal double white. Obviously it's formal double brown right now following last week's weather. But again, all of these buds are unfazed by the cold. And so these are going to be really beautiful, and probably just a couple more weeks if we stay mild. Oh, I get so excited with camellias. I do love a garden with labels. So Margaret Davis is a really beautiful camellia. And you can see these are old plants. Like, look at the trunk caliper there. But they've done reduction pruning on them, which is just really, you know, hard prunes, typically shortly after they stop flowering. And you can manage them by getting, you know, this nice juvenile growth, and it really regenerates the camellias in an important way. Here is Camellia sinensis. This is the tea plant. If you have had black tea, green tea, white tea, it comes from this. It's the top 2 leaves and the bud. It's typically harvested in spring. You can see right now it still has flower buds on it. And this is another great plant, I think, that should be utilized more for screening, suburban screening, and it's got this great edible component to it. I definitely am going to be planning another trip here because I can't live a happy life without seeing all of these camellias in bloom. So get ready for another Wilmington garden tour in the coming month or so. Check out Aztec Warrior. You know, it's pretty amazing. These are pretty far open. I would assume Wilmington was at least 8 degrees warmer than me last week, but these flower buds really didn't get burnt at all. Aztec Warrior, this is one that I have never grown. I really like how it looks at this stage with all those buds showing color. This is a really terrific camellia collection. I can see why they're on the Camellia Trail. And it's well maintained. I don't see any scale. Everything is spaced appropriately and great labels. It's everything a camellia nerd could dream for. The Tidewater Camellia Club is the very active group here in the Wilmington area, and they do an awesome camellia show. I think it's usually in February, but I would highly recommend, if you're interested in camellias, to look them up. Camellia shows are really fun to go see. You get to see all the different cultivars, perfect flowers. It's just, if you're a camellia enthusiast, it's totally worth spending a day at a camellia show. I am so impressed with this collection. I cannot wait to return. This is definitely going to be my excuse to come back to the beach. There's a significant zone difference between Fuquay and Wilmington, and Camellia reticulata is like the differentiating point. I know you always want what you can't have, but I want these huge flowers. I mean, often the flowers are like the size of a dinner plate. You can see how enormous the flower buds are. These are just not reliably hardy in the Raleigh area, but you get to Wilmington and further south, and certainly to Charleston and Savannah, and then down the Gulf Coast, reticulatas are truly remarkable. And in case anybody's curious, this is Taiwania, one of my favorite conifers. Spiky, super spiky. Deer don't like it. When I used to propagate these, you know, I couldn't get the leader because it's a tall tree. I would propagate the tips of the side branches. It would take a decade for them to initiate a leader. So you'd get like 20 foot of side growth. And this looks like the trail to the children's garden. There are a bunch of children playing just now. What a lovely place to sit in an Adirondack chair and be amazed by the camellias. I don't know how you could come here and not fall deeply in love with camellias. This collection is awesome. Well, I'm a creature of habit. This is the Acer Oliveranum variety formosanum that I featured earlier in December as one of the best late fall foliage plants. Here in Real Zone 8, you could see it didn't really get the fall color, just started to, and then with the flash freeze, the leaves are now kind of, well, frozen in place. They'll eventually drop off. But it's such a great plant. It's got beautiful green bark, really good vigor. I highly recommend that as a tree to include in your collection.
Yaupon is native, right?
Yaupon's native. I would say Andrew found like the...
And evergreen.
And berrying.
And has fruits.
I mean, you know, Yaupon holly is probably the plant, like the gateway to native gardening in the Southeast, because it checks all the boxes. This is a weeping Yaupon, Ilex vomitoria pendula, and this is a really good specimen though with all those berries. Tough as nails. It tolerates drought. It tolerates wet, heat, cold. It's definitely a plant that I definitely need to get some Yaupons.
It must need a male pollinator, right?
Yes. I say yes. I shouldn't say that with such assurance. I'm not sure.
I assumed all hollies were dioecious.
We're gonna Google it so that in the video we give them the accurate information.
Not just hearsay.
Yeah. And here we've got a yellow berried Yaupon. I don't see the label. I'm gonna look it up. I definitely want to include these on the property of the Carolina Garden House. Such fantastic seasonal interest. Well, with a very impressive Quercus glauca back here, I want to thank Andrew for joining us on our video tours today.
Well, thanks for having me.
You're welcome. You have to visit more often. Now,
For sure.
tell everybody a little bit, give everybody a little Philly flower show.
Okay. So the flower show, which will be in 2023, March 4th through the 12th, will be back indoors in the Pennsylvania Convention Center for the first time in the last 2 years. And the theme is Garden Electric, so we're getting people re-excited about gardening, and hopefully they'll be electrified by the experience. But lots of color, of course. It's always, for us up in the Philadelphia area, that time of year, even though it's not technically spring, we really feel like the flower show kicks off
It starts
spring gardening in the mid-Atlantic.
And if you haven't been to the Philly Flower Show, this is the year you need to make it a priority, 'cause it's epic. It was cool outside,
Right.
but there is something about the weather being outside. It's actually usually you have terrible weather in March.
Yeah. So you can be snowing up there,
Or an ice storm.
Cold weather. So it is a good introduction into the new growing season.
I need to take my mom. We need to get this on a plan.
Yeah, for sure.
You know. Well, everybody, I hope you've enjoyed our tours, and I highly encourage you to plan a visit to Wilmington and visit both of these gardens. And I appreciate all of you tuning in so very much. Thanks for watching, everybody. Happy gardening.